Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel that knows nothing. I am Jem. Let's get to it. So today we are going to be doing another story time. And this one is obviously called, I've got the freaking document up right now, it's called The Dragon Princess. This was like another story I was going to be doing on the Seven Winds Island, and it was a farm, but next to the farm was a beanstalk. And so, well, I guess let's just dive into the story. This was written, or at least it was submitted then. 2018. Damn, that I'm fresh out of like high school when I wrote this, and I apologize that my glasses are reflecting the actual document. That's annoying. Anyway, I sat in an armchair staring out the window of the elm farmhouse. The sun was shining, though if you weren't sitting where I was, you'd never know. The shadow of the halfway tower still loomed over the land. A single tear fell from my cheek. My memory of the tower was all too painful, though having one's memory erased from all torment didn't yet exist. I don't know, that was a very awkward sentence, not gonna lie. Auntie Hazel, what's wrong? My youngest nephew, Elijah, asked, climbing onto my lap. It is nothing for you to worry about, my sweet. I kissed his forehead. He looked up with his big brown eyes. They reminded me of her. But Auntie Hazel, you tell me everything, Eliza complained. This is something that I cannot tell you, Eli. Maybe when you were older, just maybe. I sighed, giving his red hair a few strokes. But Auntie, it isn't fair. You promised me. You promised that we would always tell each other everything. Eliza huffed, crossing his arms and raising a single eyebrow. That's very weird for a young boy to do, but apparently he did that. He reminds me of her in every way, and it saddens me that they will never know one another. I know what we promised. But I don't want to upset you, my dear. I give Eliza a small smile. Auntie Hazel, I like it when you tell me stories. He smiled. And that is enough for me to break. I can't not tell him the story of her now. Fine, I'll tell you. I point my finger at him. But you have to listen. And if you stop listening even for 1 minute, then I'll never tell you the rest. How does that sound? God, why can't I read? Does that sound fair, Elijah? I asked. Not really, but I want to hear the story, Auntie Hazel. Eliza rubbed his hands together. He always did this before I told a story. I did not always own Elm Farm. It belonged to a family, the Ainsleys, but more in particular, it belonged to a girl named Violet, and she saved me. And then this is meant to be another part. That's me starting to tell another part of the story. I'm gonna climb that tower. I'm gonna climb that tower, I stated one afternoon to my best friend Silas. We were in the markets picking up a few things for dinner. I smelt the loaf of bread and then slipped a few silver coins into the baker's hand. He tipped his hat to me and I smiled back before moving on to the next stall. Okay, now I know you're actually insane, Violet, Silas laughed, stopping to look at a store that sold baked sweets. He'd always been a sweet tooth for as long as I had known him. What? Why not? Is anyone in this town actually going to stop me? I smirked. I don't think it's a good idea. You know who owns that tower, and you know what's inside, and if he heard, well, King Hugo would personally come from Castle Crater to execute you and take back his bride. Silas folded his arms. Whoa. Who said anything about stealing his bride? I couldn't help but smile. It would have been a lie if I said that I thought that thought hadn't crossed my mind. I know you, Violet Ainsley, probably better than you know yourself. Once you set your mind to something, there is no stopping you. That's why you own Elm Farm, Silas said. I'm assuming is meant to be there, but is not. Hey, I snapped. That guy was cheating at poker and I was only teaching him a lesson. By cheating too? Silas frowned. We don't need to go over this again, I mumbled, kicking the dirt. But it's so funny to see you all wound up. I swear your hair gets redder. Silas smirked. Arsehole. Look who's talking, mate. Lord, could it be any more Australian? You're the one that has a death wish. Life would be no fun if you didn't have one, and you wouldn't have an amazing best friend either. You'd have a very average one, very much like yourself. I laughed. God, this is so bad, but I kind of like it. Anyway, I wonder what your father would think of you climbing the halfway tower, Silas said before taking off down the road towards Elm Farm. You jerk, I yelled and sprinted off after him. Silas ended up telling my father, which led to a fight, which led to a very awkward dinner with my family. I sat at the end of the table and my father glared down at me from the other. Are you that stupid to say those kinds of things in public? What if the wrong people heard? He snapped, slamming down his fist on the table, making everything on the table jump. My mother and brothers stayed silent. I looked to them and then back to my father. If the wrong people had heard, I'd be dead already, father, and nobody here cares about the halfway tower nor the princess. Nobody, I sighed. That's right, we don't. And there's a reason she's locked up in the tower, Violet. Her father torched hundreds of towns, including ours, and that's how he got his name, the Dragon King. I know, father, but she shouldn't suffer for what her father did, I complained through my gritted teeth. You don't understand, Violet. You just don't. Father rubbed his forehead. Then help me understand, I snapped. You're too young. He looked up at me and glared, and I glared back at him. You're not going to go anywhere near that tower. Is that understood? He said with a pointed finger. Fine. I pushed my chair away from the table and made a hurried exit to my room, slamming the door behind me. Arsehole, I muttered, though I couldn't help the tears falling from my eyes. I groaned, falling face first down into my lumpy mattress that I called a bed. My room's view of the halfway tower. My room's view was of the halfway tower. I pulled myself off my bed and stared up at it and blew the candle out by my bedside. It was beautiful, even though it was wrongfully imprisoning someone. Every night I saw her figure pacing about the room, and then she would finally come to the window. I had been watching her for my entire life, and even when I was little I knew one thing. She was trapped. I'm going to save you, Dragon Princess, I whispered to myself. I lie back in bed. I just have to work out how. I start to fall asleep, but the light in the tower remains on. The next morning I woke to the sound of my father pounding on my door. Violet, wake up! That beanstalk won't trim itself. A smirk came across my face. The beanstalk, of course, I said to myself as I leapt out of bed. I quickly put on a reasonable, clean pair of pants and shirt. I shove my shoes on. I run down the hall. God, this is very descriptive. This is describing everything the character is doing. I run down the hall. I slide on my leather gloves and grab my climbing gear and sling my axe over my shoulder as I go. I swiftly fall into line with my 7 older brothers. My father, as always, goes over the rules about climbing. I zone out. Once you had listened to the rules the first 20 times, they were kind of hard to forget. Do you understand? He yelled in my face. Yes, sir, I muttered back, casually wiping the spit off my cheek. Oh my god. Good, he sneered. Now, get to climbing. Father glared, pointing towards the beanstalk. I sighed and made my way over to the overgrown bean. I stretch out all my joints and then whip out the daggers from my climbing gear and some rope. The first climb of the season was always the hardest. It had been a while since I had climbed. You scared, Violet? You can always take up knitting like Mum, my brother Pete sneered. Ooh, I'm not ever gonna knit. I shook away my disgust and jumped, stabbing my daggers into the stalk. See you at the top. That's if you can make it this year, Pete. That was one time, he groaned back at me. I need to reach the top. I'll have the best view from there, I mumbled as I ripped my dagger out of the beanstalk and stabbed it back in again, slowly making my way to the top. Every now and then I stopped to cut the giant bean pods. I had to tie rope around my waist and then tie the other end to the picket that I had nailed into the stalk using the butt of my axe. Yeah, this is me just describing so I know what's happening in my head. It's over describing what's happening. I feel like I don't need to. It wasn't easy work, but it was the only work I knew. It was towards late afternoon when I reached the top of the beanstalk. I was sweating all over, and I could barely feel my arms or legs. I took off my gloves, waving them near my face for a bit of breeze. I stare at the tower. I know I can save you, I whispered. Father thinks that this isn't the right thing to do, but I know it is. I wiped the sweat from my forehead on my arm and breathed in the fresh air. I wasn't ready to come down from the height. Everything was worse down there, but up here it didn't matter. Up here there was nobody to tell me what to do or when to do it. I can't climb from the base of the tower. I get spotted easily, obviously, I sighed. Then what am I going to do? I rubbed the bottom of my chin. The tower wasn't far from the beanstalk, 300 meters or so. Gliding across was out of the question, but zip-lining wasn't. I smirked, putting my gloves back on and started making my way back down the tower. I would draw up my plans tonight when everyone was asleep. What took you so long? Was the first thing my father said to me when I set foot in the kitchen. I wanted to see the top, to see how it was doing, I said, placing my climbing gear back on the hook in the hall with my name above it. And, he asked, things are fine, I breathed, taking a seat at the table. Fine? Yes. I took a bite of my sandwich my mother made me, and my father watches me as I eat it. Can you not look at me like that? I said after a while of him staring. He gets up and leaves the kitchen. My mother sits down in the seat across from me. You shouldn't talk to him like that, Violet, she whispers. Like what? I asked, finishing off my lunch. Like you're better than him. I don't talk to him like that. I roll my eyes. You do, young lady, and if you're going to continue to do so, you won't have a place at this farm anymore, Mother said, leaving the table. But I'm the reason that we even have this place to begin with, I snapped. My mother doesn't say anything. She knows I'm right. Damn, this is long. After I finish my lunch, I sneak off into the barn and spend the rest of the day in there compiling a few things I needed for the climb. That did not make any sense. I found a few useful things, some old boots which almost fit and were better than the ones I had now, more climbing daggers which would come in handy if I dropped any, and an old climbing top made of leather. This is me just trying to plan out a cool outfit for the character. If I had been Oh, it had been my mother's back when my father and her had climbed the beanstalk. I slipped it on, fastened the buckles, and it fit perfectly. I smiled, looking down at it. What are you doing? I turned around to see my oldest brother, Bennett. Nothing, I said in a pitch too high. Bennett smirked and crossed his arms. I don't believe you. When does anyone in this family believe anything that I say? I asked. Bennett walks closer to me and then sits on the workbench. That was Mum's, he smiled. I know, I said with a sigh, stroking the leather. Dad made her give it up. Climbing, that is. Said a woman shouldn't be doing it. Bennett bit his lip. Is this the part where Father has sent you to tell me that I'm not going to do any more? Oh my God, is this the part where Father has sent you to tell me that I'm not to be climbing anymore? I asked. Bennett let out a long sigh and pushed his fingers through his hair. Yes, I scoffed. I don't believe it. He couldn't even tell me himself. Vi, he said. He's such a coward, I sobbed. Bennett got up from where he was sitting and placed his hands on my shoulders. Hey, it's going to be all right, Bennett said, steadying me. No, it's not going to be all right, I snapped. Vi, you don't understand. I wish everyone would stop telling me that. I'm not some child. Violet, would you just listen to me for a second? Bennett took his hands off my shoulder and whistled a few times. All of my brothers came into the barn, some through the windows, some through the holes in the side of the barn. All of a sudden, they were all in front of me smiling. What's going on? I asked. We're going to help you save the princess. What? But why? Because we know it's the right thing to do, Pete said. That's the last thing that I expected to come out of your mouth, I laughed. I know we're all a bit shocked when he said he'd help. Tobias spoke up. Pete playfully punches his younger brother in the arm. Shut up, Tobias. If we're gonna do this, we have to do it now. Tobias stepped forward and put a hand on my shoulder. But I don't even have my gear, I stated. Bennett smiled and Pete threw my gear on the ground before me. I quickly collected it. But how do we get over there? I said, looking up at my brothers. It's okay. We'll get you there. You just have to focus on getting the girl out of there, Pete said. Now come on. We can't waste any more time, Tobias added. I love it how I haven't said. She's got 7 brothers and I've named 3 of them. When you get away with like small things in writing. I think they were all named in another document. I don't know where it is though. With night as our cover, we snuck over to town. All the markets were closed and not a soul was on the street. We made our way to the halfway tower. We pressed our backs against the stone, making sure not to be seen by the archers that stood around the top, or the guards that patrolled the ground. You ready? Bennett asked. Not really, I confessed. You'll be fine, Bennett gave me a wink and then a bit of a boost. Just try not to alert the guards, that would be great, Pete whispered. I feel like I've self-inserted myself as Pete. Like things that would never be said in a fantasy thing he's saying. I rolled my eyes and ignored him starting to climb. Part of me couldn't believe that this was happening. I was climbing as fast as I could, but the tower was old and parts of the stone bricks were breaking off. I prayed that the guards wouldn't look up, because if they did, they'd see me ascending the tower, and any hope of saving the dragon princess would be lost. I reached the top of the halfway tower when the moon had touched the center of the night sky. I was sweaty. This was not how I intended on meeting the one person that I had thought about every day since I was 10. I pulled myself up onto the balcony surrounding the tower. Snuck past the guards on duty and leapt through the window to her quarters, and there she was sitting on the bed, head in her hands. She spun around, hearing me. I put my finger to my lips and she nodded. The dragon princess is not how I pictured her. She wore a dark purple dress with touches of silver and gold. and tied to her face was a mask that was coloured the same with with dragon horns coming off the sides, and her bright green eyes felt as if they could see into my soul. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" she questioned. Violet Ainsley? I'm here to save you," I whispered back. A smile came to her face. "You can't save me, Violet." "Yes, I can," I stated, "but it has to be now." And that is the end. I don't know why there's one more page. It's just blank. So, yeah, so there's more to this than what I have written. Violet, like, in saving her, Violet dies, but she knows she, like, dies doing the right thing. So the person at the beginning, Hazel, is the dragon princess. So what happens is, I think what I intended to happen is that Violet ends up falling from the tower, like, close to the, like, far enough from the ground that it kills her, and the brothers are still there. So Bennett takes Hazel back to the farmstead and plays her off as, like, a family member. And so Elijah is one of the brothers' sons, and they just make Hazel part of the family. But, like, there's more to her. She's, like, there's a reason why she's locked in the tower, and it's because, like, it's a bit like, you know, Shrek, in the way that Fiona is the ogre. Like, the dragon princess is actually a dragon, which is why she's got the mask on, why she's locked away. And, like, that's why the dad was, like, so, like, you don't know, like, because the dragon princess's, like, father was actually a real dragon as well, like a shapeshifter sort of thing. And so, like, that curse got passed on to her as well, got passed on to Hazel. But yeah, it's not meant to be, like, a happy thing. Like, there's obviously lots going on in the family as well, because Violet wasn't going to be able to climb anymore because the father didn't trust her, even though she's the reason they have the beanstalk farm. There's a lot going on in this, and I've shoved it all into a very short story, but I had a lot of fun writing it. This was going to be one of the stories, I think I said this at the beginning, it was going to be a story that I was going to use for the Seven Winds map, but I ended up doing the Heroes one instead. Again, there was a lot going on in this one, but there was a lot going on in this one that I just couldn't get done in the word limit that I was given. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. It was fun it's fun rereading this stuff, because honestly it's quite terrible. Anyway guys, that's all I've got for you today. Please like, subscribe, because that is always nice, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.